Welcome to Leaping the Abyss, a set of 7 podcasts hosted by Gail and Matt Taylor designed to help listeners think about their own agency and world perspective, and how individual ideas, values, actions, and beliefs help to shape and give life to the emerging paradigm, by design or default. Each of the 7 podcasts has a different interviewer, each familiar with the particular subject being explored. These roughly 30-minute interviews are more questions than answers, more nudging than perspective. For our 4th episode, please welcome Elizabeth Sahtouris and the topic Crisis is Opportunity.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, Gail and Matt. Aloha from Hawaii. It's so good to see you with your beautiful redwoods behind you.
Yes, and you have that rainbow, which I know is not accurate, but the other night you sent us a rainbow, a double rainbow, a real double rainbow that was over Hawaii. That
Absolutely.
Was
well, I actually took this picture behind me from about 6 feet from where I'm sitting right now. And sometimes when I go out, there is one again in exactly this position. Anyway, I'm really thrilled as an evolution biologist and futurist to be talking with you two, because I am a species watcher watching humanity evolve, and I believe that the two of you have done enormous amounts of work on helping humanity to evolve in this time of crisis. We've picked the title, Crisis as Opportunity, and in actual biological evolution, there have been some huge crises on our planet Earth. We call them extinctions. And after each one of these, there's been a blossoming of all kinds of new species interweaving with each other. And so we know that old Chinese concept of crisis as opportunity for something new is very valid. So let me start out by asking you how you see the opportunities in this current crisis.
Well, for the first time, humanity all over the planet, all over Earth, is in this crisis at the same time. So we were seeing things that we've never been able to see before. You know, as a futurist or somebody who believes very much in the future, I'm always saying we have to do this together. It's very difficult to do it together unless we can begin to see what we're doing. And this crisis has given us such a beautiful opportunity to see how the weather changes according to our behavior, how communities are changing, how people step up. And, you know, we need masks, we need this, we need that in this virus. And suddenly people are helping out wherever they can. So they're being called to action because of this crisis and feeling good about what they can contribute. So that's one element of how when we get hit with something quite spectacular, we rise to the occasion, and humanity seems to come forth at times where otherwise it's so scattered we can't really feel it, sense it. It doesn't bring life to it.
And the question then is, one, when this passes, will we look back on how we acted and how we dealt with it and draw the right conclusions? Or will we try to go back to the way we were behaving globally before? And will we make the connections that it's just not an accident that these kinds of things show up, but there's a lot of things that cause them, both physically and metaphysically. And this is what you might call a little slap to, hey, wake up.
Yes, I think we have seen a lot of that in past years when the crises have happened everywhere, from, say, going back a little bit to Katrina in the United States and to Puerto Rico's storms and after fires and things like that. We always see communities arising and cooperating together as if it's in our DNA to cooperate. And it is, you know, we have evolved as a cooperative species. In fact, there are only a few really, truly social species in all evolution. And we're just discovering that now, and we are one of them. You know, we know about the ants and the bees, and the blind mole rats are the only other mammals. We're now learning a lot about the funguses in the roots of all those trees out there and on my green hill behind me. So we know that the way of cooperation is far more important for us to understand, and that our economic system drove us to seeing ourselves as individuals in competition with each other. So they picked up that aspect of evolution, the Darwinian part, which to me is only the youthful mode, and then we mature. So there are other signs of maturation happening for us at this time?
I'm not sure how I would answer that. I see it everywhere, actually. I see animals rising to the occasion in a way, and seeing that, and we're seeing them cooperate more and do and interspecies support. And now maybe it's because it's on the internet, and we get thousands of these every day. But still, as we open up our minds and assumptions and see things, we also see it in nature. Oh, that's how nature works, or oh, that's what's happening there, or this is what's happening with animals. And so it's kind of a phenomena that when I see something for the first time, then and it grabs me, it calls my attention, then I see it almost everywhere. And so I see we're in a lot of trouble right now, but I also see that for the first time, I talked about the climate. We can see the climate as we're all sheltered in place. We can see the climate change, but we can also see the economics change, the religious patterns changing. I mean, educational are now seeing, because it was such a comprehensive crisis, all systems are resetting. And I don't know whether that.
Yeah, I could add to that a little bit. It's interesting. We live a mile up from the ocean, and about a mile down on the highway next to the ocean and over is a place called Sea Ranch, and it was designed by a designer who was very conscious of the land. Beautiful pictures where he drew the land in 3 dimensions and then decided where the houses would go, so that there's lots of space. And from the very beginning, they said the animals belong here too. And so the deer just kind of walk around, and people talk about, they open up their back door and here's a little baby deer on the pad where the mother has left, like, take care of her, I got to do some things. And 2 or 3 hours later, the mother deer will come back and get the little baby deer, and off they'll go. And so the cooperation between animals, and we have everything that, very big and very strong and considerably supposed to be violent animals. We have some pumas and things like that. And, one of them jumped a fence and got hold of someone's little designer pig, and she wanted him shot, and everyone said, the hell with that. If you want to have a little designer pig, you take care of it. But, we're not taking out our wildlife because they belong here as much as we. This is very different. And this has been going on for since the 60s.
Yes.
Yeah.
The movement's been called bioregionalism.
Yeah.
And we've tried to make nature, of course, subservient to our economy, that we see it as a set of, or we're taught to see it as a set of resources for human use.
Right.
And that's all shifted around. There are so many people now recognizing that if we fit our economics into nature, that will work much better, and that we need that diversity, that nature never does monoculture as humans do.
No.
And I know that in your work with groups of people, what your specialty is, evoking group genius from very diverse people.
Yeah.
So you've talk a little bit about the importance of that diversity in your workshop.
The first thing we did when we met is informal discussions about our belief in humanity. And both of us realized that we both had huge regard for humanity and respect for the natural person, for what we thought was at birth, the opportunities that everybody had. And so then we started stripping away the parts that didn't work to let humans be humans in their full capacity. And we said, well, how do meetings stand in the way? Because all they want to know on business meetings only want to know a tiny little bit about a person and not much, and everything's put in boxes, and you don't talk to people from other silos and other fields. So we started saying, no, if we're going to do this work, the whole human has to show up, and we have to create a field where there's trust that they're in this space and they're being asked for more than their thoughts on their job and money and things like this. And it's just amazing because people are so eager to be human, to be natural, to be in there and to share information. It is such a natural thing when the environment is set up for them to do that. And so when we looked at the rate of change and said, the only way we can do this is to let go of all of our assumptions and all of our mental models about how the world works and open it up to new possibilities.
Something I'd add to that. Of course, it still exists on this planet. And of course, in the United States, we had a very large slave economy. And we don't recognize yet that the wealth that was built on that slave economy. And a lot of jobs today, the way they're manipulated is slave labor. It's better because at least they get paid something, but it is treated. And something that you said earlier, we in a sense try to enslave the earth. Well, no living system should be slaved, should be made into a slave on any level, any scale, anywhere. And so, because like you point out, when you don't do that, the harmony and the cooperation is so much more wealth creating and health creating and mentally sound than this way that we have allowed ourselves to get into this very extreme. There's some value in organizing and creating organizations that can produce things and get very specialized with it. But when that gets overstrained, then when something happens, well, what are we going to do? We know how to build cars. What are we going to, so the whole thing collapses catastrophically rather than evolving.
Yeah, and that's one of the beauties of the human species is that it can be so flexible, so very adaptive, so very quickly adaptive. And we used to see evolution as very slow process, but in fact, it jumps by leaps and bounds, like after crises, to suddenly find all these new species working together in harmony. So what we're learning to do is kind of rise up higher to see bigger pictures. Yeah. And I wonder whether you have particular ways of doing that when you meet with these groups of people to get them to expand their horizons and see the whole where there isn't one top-down dog in charge, but an interweaving of things, as you were just saying. But do you have particular ways of getting people to see that bigger picture?
The CEO or whoever is sponsoring plays one role in particular and then becomes a co-designer. But that one role is to step up in the front of the room and say, we're going to do more than you thought possible, than I thought possible. We're opening up all channels, all avenues. There is no right or wrong here. And what we do in this environment stays in this environment until we're ready as a team to produce results that we want to go out. So it creates a safe space for people to be able to come together and explore that that potential. But people have name tags. It's called Elizabeth or Gail or Matt, often not last names, just first names. No job descriptions, no even project descriptions, because when we went to what stands in the way, it's not who you are that we're interested in, it's who you're becoming. And we let people know that in the beginning, that you're going to be changing over the next 3 days. You know, life is process, as Bucky says, life is a verb. And so think of yourselves as verbs as you go through these next few days of constantly being able to hear something new and accept it instead of rejecting it. And the setup's pretty good. And then, of course, the scan, you can talk about the scan, but we never come directly at the question. If people come in to solve a problem, it's day 2 before we even bring that up. If we're in a 3-day period, for instance, because the first day is exploration, scanning, of which there are in many ways no right and wrong answer. It's, you know, how does a rainforest decide? Who's more intelligent about swarming and forming than humans are? You know, what's the role of slime mold? These kinds of things that people hear about, but they never take time. It's time to scan that is our most valuable asset, I think, in a design shop. That and walking out with results.
Yeah, so the opening exercise is one that we use a lot, is that, you know, we have very large curved floor to ceiling work walls, and they come in, and we have everyone as many times as we want to cycle through, come up, and we go 20, 30, 40, sometimes 100, sometimes 200 years back in the past. And then we have the present, and then we have the future, and we go out into the future. Now, how far depends on the kind of company they are, or community, and the issues that they are confronting. But sometimes we go 100 years or more. And so here's this big blank wall. And then everyone comes up and says, I'm Joe, and I'm going to go over here and write about this happened in 1923. And someone, well, this happened in 1500, and one said, this is going to happen in this. And we just let them do this, and we cycle through, and they start following each other's ideas. And meanwhile, we have scribes up there drawing little pictures around these things to give it sort of a visual content. And at the end of about an hour and a half, what they have created is a past, present, future scenario. And they are amazing, and they are accurate. We have tested some of these against where people pulled high-level people together for weeks to write a scenario about the future, and they compared ours in the same subject, and ours was more accurate.
You make a very good point, Matt, in showing us that we need to expand not only our spatial big picture, but our temporal big picture.
Yes, exactly.
And as people are moving more and more onto the internet and trying to figure out how to work together this way. And it's amazing because we have the diversity now of speaking to people in many different countries in the same meeting without having to do polluting air travel and things like this. So any hints that you can give to people who are having these meetings online now for self-organizing, for expanding their big picture view, for seeing things like that in ecosystems, no one species is in charge, that the co-creativity comes from, as you say, everyone playing their individual unique role, so that we can begin to, as you're very fond of saying, evolve by design, not by default. So go a little bit into that design, but rather than default way of moving into our evolutionary future.
Well,
maybe Matt, you should go first this time.
Well, we have lots of tools. The environments are full of books, and after the scan day, we give everyone a book, or we pile them on the table and say, pick out a book that attracts you, and tomorrow come back having read that book, and we have a little slip in there by how to read a book in an hour and stuff like that and get the content. And when they come back, we then say, we wait until more the end of the second day where we've moved from scan into starting to get into some of the operational issues and the focus and everything. But then we have them stand up as the author. I wrote this book about ecology or this. And what I've observed here in the first 2 days, that we're not thinking of this, we're not thinking of that. We need to expand our horizon. We had one where a young man, he came to this design shop this first day of employment, and he was hired into the research, and it was the biological research. It was a cosmetic company that was getting ready to go public. And he had a book, he picked a book, Why Elephants
When Elephants Weep.
Yeah. And standing up in front of everyone in the room was older. Everyone in the room had been with the corporation longer. Everyone had been some outside consultant or expert that came. And he stood up and he said, starting next Monday, we are no longer going to do animal testing. We don't have to. Here's why. And here is what we're doing to conscious beings when we do it. And that company did it. Now, that is not something in a normal corporate organization. You start talking about, he'd probably lose his job in the first week of this job there. But when you create this field of openness where people know that they're playing with these ideas, and it's on the third day that they choose and select and make their plan, they have freedom.
So the other thing about that is we bring more expertise into the room. Mm-hmm. So now we have 40 people who are sitting there, but we also have 40 authors.
Yes.
And they are, they become alive. And, people would, my name is Elizabeth Satoris, and I want to talk about evolution or whatever. And they would, pick up the essence from what they discovered from you. And afterwards, people they just flock to the books and say, I have all these authors I'm now going to read. But we do everything we can to neutralize and while stimulating the environment and each other. So we neutralize that it's not worth arguing and debating. This is about conversation, unfolding. This is about our future and present and past working as a whole system at recursive levels, holarchy or whatever. And they get it because you know this so well. We want to please. It's in our destiny to please and to work toward things. And so we give a few commands. People know we're honest from the way we interact and talk and work with them. And so they work hard to please each other and themselves and us.
Now, the important thing is when they get to that third day and they're laying out their plan and they're working in teams all day long. They have selected the work. On the third day, we stand back and take notes. And the only thing is they have to have a plan with charts and maps and flow charts and dollars at the end of that day. And when that starts to happen, they take all of these ideas that they built on the first day and then analyzed and talked about and drilled into on the second day. And they build this plan that would normally take a corporation 4 or 5 or 6 months to do, and it wouldn't even be the right answer. And
that's a good point, because you're talking about how you can concentrate, focus, and speed things up by these group dialogues with diverse people who have a common goal to live better on this planet.
Yes.
And we're seeing, as we record this, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and people are noticing things like, wow, air travel shut down overnight, the transport, and the skies are blue. So while we thought that things would take a long time to change, we see that even at a global level, you can have such effects immediately, that we didn't need that much travel, that many airplanes filled up all the time and so on. So we're seeing, and the effects of people getting together, singing together in huge choruses or entertainers, and the new heroes are the carers, the people who care for each other. So this shift is from the crisis which we brought about through our individualism and our hostilities, and suddenly moving toward the harmonies. And wow, we naturally want to look after each other and care for each other and share what we have with each other. And that's, to me, the big step in evolution we're in.
It's so exciting to me. It's so exciting as a teacher. I've said all along, well, wait a minute. Who are the people who keep the economy going? It's the people who are now stepping up and being the first responders, because we're always there to wait tables, to be in the hospital, to teach children. But it's been kind of like, well, yeah, but you're not an entrepreneur and you don't know how to make a lot of money. And so, and we can only afford to pay you $50,000 for a year. We'll take the 14 billion that we make, not quite that much, but almost, and turning it upside down.
So, but part of what has to happen here is we're creating a new language.
Yeah.
We have a whole book, this thick of what we call our modeling language, where we have simple models that people can look at, but the important thing, it gives them new words. Example, you talked earlier about feedback. Well, let me give you some feedback. I think you're too short. Well, that's useful, right? And so the definition of feedback we use is feedback is the signal or a message to the controller of a system from a sensor of the system of the difference between performance and expectation. Well, that sounds rather abstract, but the point is feedback is only something. My answer to that person says you're too short. I said, well, in the first place, you're not a sensor of my system. And in the second place, I don't control my height. So it's amusing, but it is not useful. When people start to learn a few technical terms and change their language and open their language up and take the best science language, the best metaphysical language, the best modeling language, the best different art languages, and we consider this to be an art as much as anything else, their new language opens up. It's like going to the dictionary and looking at the etymology. Oh, I didn't know those words. Oh, this is really cool. And so when the organization starts to change its language and its style, and it stops debating and it starts collaborating, listening, and say, look, we want to build this thing. Okay, instead of arguing about this, let's get all the ideas out, get the right ones, test it, run it through, and then the whole epistemology of the organization becomes more mind-like, brain-like than this kind of artificial thing that has grown out of the last about 100 years.
Absolutely. And our time is running out here. So now, as all of us are being called on to become first responders in a more caring world, what very brief piece of advice would each of you give to all of the people who are now actively engaged in seeing to it that this crisis becomes an opportunity for building the world we want?
I would tell them not to forget that a crisis is always an opportunity, and not to forget the feelings of when they stepped up to say, I have a piece of the solution. I helped my neighbors at the grocery store today in our little town. Everybody's so friendly, and helpful. And they are the first responders, and if anybody's kind of in a bad mood or worried, they're just there to add a good word. And so if we can remember these small things we did together, all of us throughout the world, staying sheltered in place and going out carefully to the store, waving hello to everybody at 7:00 at night, thanking all the responders in New York. Have you seen that? Have you heard that on television? It's so much fun. So it's just for all of us who are excited about where we are today. I mean, sad, but excited to keep the message going forward. This is ours to choose by design or default, because we're all in this together. As Bucky says, there's only one boat. That's us. We're all in it together. So that's my.
Yeah, and I'd add a couple of things.
Matt, 10-second response.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's anticipatory design, Bucky term, but it has to be high frequency, low magnitude. And then iteration and iteration and iteration.
Yeah.
Not big magnitude, you see, because what we do is we keep it a secret design and we build this big thing and then it doesn't work, you know. And
there are many solutions.
And so this has, what I would say, take the lesson, don't forget, keep moving forward.
And
enjoy
much aloha. That's a wonderful way to close.
Great. So
it was fun. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out the next interview in the Leaping the Abyss series by Design Not Default with Philippe Colomb. You can also find more information on each podcast by visiting bodyofknowledge.online.